What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fitness Stuff for Normal People podcast. I'm Mariana here with Tony, and it's no secret that the fitness industry sucks, period. Whether it's the corrupt multi-billion-dollar supplement and weight loss industry or the endless supply of influencers promoting anything to drive page views. The bottom line is we're not trying to provide just another fitness podcast, but completely change the fitness industry for the better by providing you with the knowledge and tools to give you confidence in applying the best possible training and nutrition into your own life. Where today we are going to be talking about studies that blew our minds, where we each handpicked 2 studies that completely changed the way we previously thought about any aspect of health. We really appreciate you guys getting us to over 1,000 5-star reviews on Spotify. We want to keep that momentum up in 2023. We have big goals. We want to reach more people. And one of the best ways to do that is by continuing to review our episode on any streaming platform. It really helps us get that engagement, get noticed a little bit more, and reach more voices, which is the goal at the end of the day. So we really appreciate you if you've done that already.
I double dog dare you. Go do it right now while I tell you about everything else, especially today's sponsors. But first, especially in theme with today's episode, if you really like the research aspect of what we bring into each episode, make sure you join us over on the premium membership in the Fitness Stuff Research Review, where we dive deeper into specific studies addressing individual nuances, showing you how to apply each aspect into your own specific lifestyle. Now, we've also got a little cool deal going on through the new year, where we're offering 50% off your first month subscription. So for just $5, you get access to the weekly research review with the presentation that goes along with that, the monthly Ask Me Anything or AMA episodes where you can ask your own questions where we answer, and access to the special discounts only for the pro members with Examine Plus, with Merrick Health, the companies that we do not accept payment from, but we pass those savings on to you. Now, a quick word from today's sponsor, Legion Athletics. Since the start, we've been working with Legion, and I think with New Year's, we're pretty clear about this. We've done a lot of supplement episodes. You don't need supplements to make progress. You don't, but the right ones can help. And I think especially when people are trying to make changes in their New Year's habits, right? Trying to lose weight, trying to build muscle and strength, whatever it is, a common goal you see is increasing your protein intake. That's going to help you lose weight faster, help keep it off, help keep you satiated and fuller for longer periods of time, along with build muscle and strength. The hard part about it when you're trying to lose weight is staying in a calorie deficit while keeping your protein intake high enough to do all those things. That's where a nice whey protein shake can come through. We're a big fan. I know Mariana and I do not shut up about the flavors. My honey cereal. Are you honey cereal too? What team are you on?
Right now I'm on honey cereal. I think that's currently my favorite.
I'm converting everybody. But that's what team we're on. But those shakes can make things so much easier to keep your calories low, protein high, and to fill you up all day, to make it easier to just stick to your goals. So if you head over to Legion's website, or just down in the link in our show notes, along with the research review, you can find our link to Legion's website, or you can just type in FSPOD, FSPOD at checkout for 20% off your first order, or double points for every order after that. Now we get into it. A fan favorite, our favorite episode, Studies That Blew Our Mind. Today, Mariana's talking about poop. I'm talking about habits and everything else. We're going to go into it. Handpicked 2. Last one I think we did was early December. This is going to be mid-January. This is actually the first recording we are doing in the new year.
I know.
Which I'm pretty excited for. Because I know, I don't know if it from a listing perspective, it sounds weird, because I know we record a week or 2 earlier. So I never thought about that. This is our first recording of the new year.
Like months in advance, like just I don't know.
I'm not that proactive. I'm not that proactive to think months in advance. I can't even think what I'm doing after this, but it should be fun. So hopefully everyone had a safe, fun new year. I know we launched the caffeine episode last week, which is a favorite. We did that one, but this is the first one of the new year. We ended on a strong note. We're going to continue going. This is episode 51. So we're in the back half of our centennial goal of making it all the way. So I think I always forget how we do this. We each handpick 2. We're going to go back and forth. Who wants to start today? And just a heads up to all the listeners, we also brought these in for a blind reaction. So I have not read through Mariana's studies that she is talking about presenting today. She has not gone through mine either. So who do we want to go pick here? You can see my hands. I was like, pick a number between 1 and 3. You want me to start, or you want to go?
I don't care.
Yeah, rock, paper, scissors. Okay.
I'll start.
Hit it. Okay, so
Well, we got everyone's attention. I'll go. All right.
Study number 1, what you got?
Yes. And this
Wait,
is
we talking about poop? We talking
we're
about poop
talking
to
about
start?
poop.
Nice.
We're talking about stool. This is a recent study. It was just published in December, which is huge. I always like to bring out like pretty new studies just because I also think it's fun to add in an aspect of like current events almost in the nutrition science literature. This is specifically about the gut microbiome. The objective of the study was to determine whether or not gut microbial energy extraction, as reflected by stool energy density, so looking at energy density in your feces, that's why Tony said I'm talking about poop, is associated with transit time in the intestines. So transit time is the time it takes for food and anything in your intestines to move through it and reach the endpoint, and the gut microbiome community. So the different types of microbes, if that plays a role in how much energy is extracted, and then how that affects your weight in humans. This is really fascinating. It's a little bit more in depth, but also I feel like this was a really cool study to introduce because this is how we do microbiome research in humans. You have to look at their feces, and a lot of people don't talk about that. That's also one of the reasons why studies are still very limited, because you can't get huge samples to do this.
Sounds like a really fun job. I'm a researcher. I'm a researcher.
If you can volunteer, though, you get this. Typically has some good compensation. It's not an easy to study volunteer for, but I'm sure that there's places you could do it if you're looking for extra
I'm just
money.
imagining the conversation at home for the holidays when everyone's like, oh, what do you do for work? You bring them to like the girlfriend's house for, I'm a researcher. Oh, what kind of research do you do?
Yeah.
Just digging through poop. Okay,
so,
sorry, keep going.
Getting into what researchers did makes this a little bit more clear. They looked at the energy content of stool specimens from 85 overweight, and this is Danish men and women, so not American, and participants included men and women from 22 to 66 years old. Researchers also studied the length of this journey of the food through your intestinal tract for each participant, all of whom who had similar dietary patterns, which was really, really, really important to control for. And that is also another reason why the sample size is very small, because you do have to control for some aspect of diet. Of course, you can't have every single person eating the exact same thing. It's pretty hard to monitor, but having similar dietary patterns is important. And researchers actually hypothesized that those with a long digestive travel time would be the ones who harvested the most nutrition, energy from their food, which kind of makes sense if you think about, oh, well, it's taking longer to move through. Of course, we're going to extract more energy from it. It's just there longer. So that's important. I'll go back to that when I'm talking about the results. So what did they find? Participants were divided into 3 groups based on the composition of their gut microbes. The so-called B-type composition, that's just an abbreviation for the type of bacteria that dominates in that group, was more effective at extracting nutrients from food. And 40% of participants fell into this special TB group. They are characterized by having a lower diversity of gut bacteria and faster travel time for food through their digestive tracts. This group was also found to have less energy in their stool compared to the other 2 groups, which could not be explained by differences in habitual diet, which is important. That is why they aimed to control for dietary patterns, because that would influence the results here. That would play a huge, huge role in the composition of their microbes. So this group is also found to have less residual energy. So the researchers also observed that the group with less energy in their stool also weighed more than the other 2 groups. So going back to what they hypothesized about those with longer digestive travel time would be the ones harvested the most nutrition or energy from their food, that was actually not the case. So those who did extract the most energy from food had shorter intestinal transit time. So that's kind of interesting why that is, that you can't determine from the study. But they also weighed 10% more on average than the other 2 groups. So that was like the biggest takeaway here, because what we're trying to see is there any sort of relationship between the amount of energy our microbes are extracting and our weight in the host? Is this affecting our energy balance as humans as well? Because as we know, and we've talked about this a lot before, I mean, energy balance and total daily energy expenditure, how many calories you burn in a day, all of that. Your weight loss journey when you're in a calorie deficit can be determined by a multitude of factors, but sometimes really small individual factors, whether it comes to genetics or gut microbiome, can also explain differences from person to person in their own experiences losing weight.
Wow. This actually is, because I know you were giving me a heads up on it, but not actually taking me through it. That's actually really crazy how which I'm trying to think why that could be. Like, is it just working more efficiently? Is it anything? But I think that just goes to show, like you were saying, like the people who discount a calorie deficit, it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for XYZ. It's like, and I think we've both talked about this on our social media profiles a lot. It's so much more complicated and complex than just do more and eat less food, right?
Yeah.
Like how your body extracts and burns energy and calories is so much more complicated than just like, oh, go work out, go run for 100 calories, whatever it is. And this is just another layer to that, which I think no one really thinks of is, is the food I eat, it's like, is it the food I eat or is it the food I'm digesting that's going towards it, which is a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Dang.
And like kind of shortened, what does this all mean? The differences in weight gain could be attributed to the fact that the gut microbiome from obese individuals are more efficient at extracting energy from food. Energy, again, if you're not familiar, these are like energy and calories are used interchangeably. So a kilocalorie is a unit of energy. So that's kind of what they mean, just more so in general terms. So that may play a role. Of course, that is not something you can determine just from this study alone, causation. There will never be a cause and effect again, because like Tony was saying, like there are so many different factors that go into this and your overall weight, ability to lose weight. But this is definitely, it's not a new field of research. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this had been going on in animal studies for the past 2 decades almost. But in terms of human beings, this is the first time this study has been looked at in humans. And I definitely think that this is going to evolve a lot more as the years go on.
I can't wait till this research does explode a little bit. Because like you were saying, it's rare sometimes that stuff like this will transfer from animals to humans.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a very significant amount. Like this seems like there's something in here, which it's almost crazy, because you're like, okay, you're almost, the people who are more obese or do way more, their guts are working more efficiently, which you'd almost think would be opposite with like dietary patterns and things like that. So I'm at, that's kind of, it opens like a whole new freaking world.
When they looked at their stool, like at the end of the day, the individuals who weighed more also had significantly less energy left in, or if you wanted to say energy, calories in their stool. So that means that they were taking, the microbes were utilizing it. So that was associated with increased weight, whether or not that caused it. Again, there's so many factors that go into that. There's a lot of potential there. I just thought that was so fascinating, because there are definitely people that lose weight faster than others, or may have to do, like you think about people with PCOS, like they have to, again, the fundamentals are the same, definitely have to be in a calorie deficit, but someone with PCOS is going to have to consider a lot more, jump through a lot more hoops to be able to lose weight. And it's most likely not going to be at the same rate as someone without PCOS. So yeah, that can be misconstrued a lot, especially I think in our space. And even from us, it's like, even us saying you do have to be in a calorie deficit, our words can get flipped a lot. And people be like, oh, well, it's not that simple. Like,
we're not saying it's simple. We're not saying it's simple.
That's a point of entry.
Exactly. Dang. Okay. Starting off the new year with some heat. Talking about that poop. Okay. Moving on. My second study, also about poop. No, I'm kidding. We're done talking about.
Oh my God. I'd be like, wow.
That was big. That's just the whole episode theme. I'm going to go into this one. So I brought 2. One's going to be talking about habits. I thought that'd be interesting for the new year's. I'm going to cover that one second, because this is the more recent one that I was reading through that caught my eye. And ever since we had Shane Hanner on the podcast, it was when we were first starting out. This was months and months ago. He's what we'd say is like a breathwork expert. We had a whole episode on breathwork, which I can't recommend enough to go re-listen to it, because I had never paid too much attention to breathwork practices, and even just how efficiently I'm breathing through the day, until we got to sit down with him and have that conversation. Now, this was done at a university graduate school in Korea. They were investigating the effect of oral breathing on cognitive activity using functional brain imaging. What does that mean? It's a really cool test. Now, if you ever heard, and this is also my favorite new diss to somebody, is calling them a mouth breather instead of something else, like, oh, you're such a mouth breather. It's like a
Don't they
diss.
use that in Stranger Things? They
I've
call
never
people
actually
mouth
seen
breathers.
that. Do they really? I've never seen it. That bums me out because I like to be original, so I'm gonna stop saying that. But
You have to. I'm a little bit disappointed in you, but it's fine.
it's too big of a commitment. I'm already like 7 seasons late. It's too big of a commitment to start.
Never.
Anywho, this study was looking at differences in brain imaging. They used fMRI scans. I'll go through how they actually did this in a second. During different cognitive tasks in the groups, when they had them nasal breathing or breathing through their nose only or breathing through their mouth only. So not just to see if they performed better on certain tasks, but actually what was going on in their brain. So they took 22 healthy subjects, 12 women, 10 men, in their mid to low 20s. Now, researchers recorded brain structure and fMRI scans for working memory tasks during oral and nasal breathing. And fMRI is functional magnetic resonance imaging, right? Measuring brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. Now, when an area of the brain is in use, blood flow to that region also increases. That's kind of how this technology works. So subjects went through numerous working memory trials while either focusing on nasal breathing or oral breathing. And they didn't just separate these people into two separate groups. This was still a very small scale study, but they had each participant go through nasal and oral to compare and not just separating completely. And just a side note, which I thought was kind of important, during the oral breathing session, they actually plugged the nasal passages so you could induce oral breathing naturally without any enforcement. Because if you're just saying breathe through your mouth, it would easily go through there. So we got plugs up our nose during this. And just to kind of clarify what it is, an example of a working memory task. So they do these a lot in like different cognitive measures. This could just include something like holding a person's address in mind while listening to instructions about how to get to that address, or listening to a sequence of events in a story while trying to understand what that story means as a whole. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do this, but these are just some examples of what working memory tasks include. And that's what they took these guys through as they were going through. Now, this is the one part that stinks about audio and on podcast, because the images of the brain scans side to side are kind of astounding. Now, I posted them on my Instagram story earlier today, and we're going to put them on the podcast page as well if you want to revisit them, and the actual study is going to be down below. But when compared, nasal breathers, they did score slightly higher on accuracy during these tests, which isn't too important, and it wasn't that large of a difference. But nasal breathers showed significantly more brain activation and connection compared to mouth breathers in fMRI scans, where 15 regions of the brain were significantly activated in the nasal breathing group compared to just 10 regions in the mouth breathing group. So 5 added regions when you're doing these scans. The regions activated more, or only in this case, during the nasal breathing are those more needed for working memory performance, obviously, and executive information processing. So the takeaways here are that there is a pretty astounding, and I had not heard of this difference until we had Shane on the podcast. Had you, like, when we were asking him, like, is there really a big difference between breathing? Like, it's going to your lungs, right? Like, is there really a big difference between this? And apparently there's not a large body of evidence, but it's growing, supporting the fact that nose breathing is so imperative to how you sleep, how you recover, but also how you perform during the day, which is kind of creepy to think about. Because if I ever have like a clogged nose, I'm like, oh my God, I'm breathing through my mouth. I'm going to die early. But
and there's nothing worse than, I was just sick for a little bit over Christmas, and there's nothing worse than having, like, sleeping with a clogged nose. At least I think, like, I just don't sleep.
Awful. It's awful. And you wake up with like a dry, scratchy throat, all this. But a lot of people, it's how you kind of do it. And I was just talking to you before the show. Like, when I lay down completely horizontal, I automatically, no matter if I am breathing fresh all day, my nose gets congested at night. And there's a couple of things. I don't know. I look like a straight doofus, but I just started doing this because of Shane. And you might have seen this, and we could post it on Instagram too. But using mouth tape at night, it literally tapes your mouth shut. And I've got facial hair too, so I have to use like this creepy one. I look like a ghost to just shut my lips. And then either that or even a nasal strip to pull open your nose so you can better focus on nasal strips. Be like an Alex Hormozy, nasal strips all day. Do you remember when Hormozy went through that?
I was like, who does that?
Hormozy. Is Alex Hormozy. I used to get into that.
That's so
And I
weird.
use them at night, which is a big help because I told you I've adjusted my sleep quite a bit to make sure that I am breathing through my nose, just to focus on that. Putting pillows behind
Yeah.
my back, so I'm elevated slightly. I have the nasal opening
I've
and
always
now the
slept
mouth
slightly
tape.
elevated. I can't sleep flat. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and now it makes sense with why Alex Ramosi would do that. Where, and for those unfamiliar, he's an entrepreneur, big on social media. He would wear those nasal strips that I think people typically use for snoring, but you tape your nose and it widens the nasal pathway. So it makes it easier to breathe through your nose. And he would wear this throughout the entire day, and people were giving him crap. Now it kind of makes sense. If more of your brain is activated during the day, if you're working, if you're solving problems, if you're going through this, and more of your brain is able to work, if you're able to work more efficiently, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So if you're just right here listening to this and you're like, holy crap, I'm breathing through my mouth, what am I doing? Might be worth looking into some nasal strips, or maybe some tape at night, or changing some things around to focus on. That's why like breathing and breath work practices like Shane talked about, or meditation can really help, because you can now consciously think about breathing through your nose. That study just kind of changed it, because I'm like, holy, I've never seen images put to it. And I think that hits people, I think, harder sometimes when they can see a difference rather than just hear it. And especially with data that actually translates to humans instead of just animals. So that's mine. Watch us next week, both showing up with nasal strips.
Nasal strips, I used to wear them all the time when I was younger for whatever reason. Like my mom gave them to me when I'd be sick, but I just liked them after. I don't know. But
the next sponsor of the podcast, nasal strips.
Taping my mouth, can't do it.
It is a little scary because you're like, what if you need to, but it's also just tape. So you just open your mouth harder and it comes off. So that was study number 2 of 4. We got poop. We got nose breathers, mouth breathers. Number 3.
I'm excited about this one. This one's much less complex than the last one I went through, but I find that this is a good one that is specifically relevant to a lot of just the crap you see on social media still. But this was the evaluation of physical activity calorie equivalent, so PACE for short, labels impact on energy purchased in cafeterias. And this was a randomized controlled trial. A little bit of background. A recent meta-analysis suggested that using physical activity calorie equivalent, which includes kilocalories in minutes of walking, required to expend the energy content of a labeled food. So if you've ever seen anyone being like, you would need to do this amount of exercise to burn off 1 slice of pizza, which just sucks for so many reasons. But that meta-analysis concluded that including those labels resulted in people selecting and consuming less energy. But the meta-analyses included only one study in a naturalistic setting, so like a real life setting, and conducted in 4 convenience stores only. So there were a lot of flaws there, and how to take that away, you couldn't really draw those conclusions. So researchers from this randomized controls trial aim to estimate the effect of these PACE, for short, labels on energy purchase in worksite cafeterias in the context of a randomized study design. So what did researchers do? This was 10 worksite cafeterias in England, approximately 19,000 workers employed at the sites, 72% male, with an average age of 40. This study duration was 12 weeks, and over 250,000 transactions were recorded. So the primary—
That's a lot of data.
Yeah, it's a lot of data. The primary outcome measure that they were looking at was total energy purchased from intervention items. These were the ones with the labels on them per day. And then the secondary outcomes were energy purchased from the non-intervention items, so the items without any labels, total energy purchased per day, and revenue. So I liked that they looked at, one, just compared a control versus intervention group. And because a lot of the studies in the meta-analyses did not include randomized controlled trials. And then they also were looking at per day and then total purchased at the end. So they were looking at the total duration. And again, why is this important, and why I wanted to include this is because this is more so a behavior analysis. We can't directly tell large populations of people what exactly to do to make more informed nutrition decisions. So we go to the extent of how can we interact at the consumer level? How can we change purchasing behavior? This kind of goes into the field of food economics, which is really interesting. But we're not going to ever say, you know, that these labels cause people to eat less. It's more so this may cause people to purchase items that have less calories and maybe would help with weight loss when compounding, when doing this often. But the results from this study found that there was no evidence of an overall effect of the energy purchased from intervention items. That was 1,934 calories per site per day less. So total. And during the intervention relative to baseline, it was just around minus 5 calories per transaction compared to those who didn't compared to baseline. So that was like from the start, kind of how many calories they were purchasing versus when they had these labels.
That's surprising me.
Yeah. So there was no evidence for effect of energy purchased from the non-intervention items either. So the people who never even had these labels added, again, around minus 5 calories per site per day.
Pretty much nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's per site again. So that can seem like a lot less than 1,934 calories per site with the intervention label group. But when it comes down to individual purchases, no, it's pretty negligent, the difference. And there was no evidence for total energy purchased minus 2,900 calories per site, equivalent to around minus 8 calories per transaction. So
that surprised the heck out of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
did you think going into it that would be the complete opposite?
See, I've always hated the kind of social media aspect of this is how many, how long you'd have to work out and what you'd have to do to burn this amount of calories. It's more so like this fear tactic almost. So that I just know typically in the long term doesn't work for people. But initially I thought maybe this would kind of scare people into being like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of work. But
that's 100% where my head was. I mean, yeah, because we've talked about this. And for those that are less familiar with social media, but listen to the podcast, it's a broken line of thought to have to earn the food that you eat through exercise. And it's a very common train of like, oh, you know, if you want to lose weight, exercise more, eat less. It's not how it works. And out of your total daily energy expenditure, how many calories you burn in a day? We've talked about this several times on the show. We did a whole episode on TDEE back when we first started too. The exercise accounts for usually the very smallest percentage of calories that you burn in a day compared to your basal metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food. So even the calories that you're burning just digesting the food you eat typically burns more than a workout does, along with your non-exercise movement as well. So thinking you have to exercise more to burn off calories, it's broken logic. It doesn't make sense. But again, it's a scare tactic, like you said, that people use all the time on social media. One small French fry would take 3.5 hours of jump roping to burn off in calories, or whatever it is walking. I really would have bet money that people would have purchased less calorie dense food if that was clearly on the label. I really would have thought that with my whole heart.
Yeah, I feel like I could go both ways, because then you also have just another reason why I hate this so much is again, it's a workplace cafeteria, but what if something is just cheaper? Like almost, and the thought behind this is why researchers even do studies like this in general. It's more so a public health intervention is, okay, could we implement this in communities? Could we implement this at schools? Wherever there is a more public setting of selling food in that type of environment, like any type of cafeteria, maybe some smaller convenience stores. And it just is so it neglects the fact that price for most people is going to be much more important than how many calories it's going to, like how long I have to work out to burn off this.
Yeah.
If you don't have the money, you don't have the money.
Yeah. There's a lot going into it, I guess, when you're thinking you're in a convenience store, you're in a cafeteria, you're not like studying your food labels. You're just grabbing something to go.
Yeah.
Most of the time too.
I'm like wondering how the approval process went for workplaces to accept this, because if I was a worker, I mean, also just the field I'm in, I'd be like, this is so bad for people's mental health.
I know you and I would get this, but like the average Joe would be like, oh, this is a great idea.
Yeah.
This is a great idea.
Like that I think it relies on extrinsic motivation. One, if you're just completely making your food decisions based off of how long it's going to take you to work out to burn it off, that's just not going to last long. But I hate it.
Hate it. We hate it. We
But
hate
you
it.
want to know how I really feel?
Okay.
But I thought that
So
this was interesting and like also just
very
applicable to
interesting.
today.
Another reason to not give a shoot about how long it would take to jump rope, or stair climb, or walk or run to burn off anything, because it don't make no sense. So eat those M&Ms. That's my go-to dessert at a convenience store.
I don't like M&Ms.
Shut. Are you serious?
But I'm also just a dark chocolate person.
Oh yeah, we talked about that in the caffeine episode.
So,
why you're up till midnight, maybe just snacking on dark chocolate.
I don't even eat that much. I have like a little square.
How many milligrams of caffeine does 1 ounce of dark chocolate? Do we say, was it 29 or 24 milligrams of caffeine?
I think it was something around that.
Still interesting. Go listen to that podcast if you haven't last week. Caffeine's an interesting one. Now, let's tie it up a little New Year's fun. So, final study we're going to bring to, and this one was actually highlighted to me first by James Clear, which I know we've mentioned the book Atomic Habits at least a handful and a half times on this show. So if you haven't read Atomic Habits, especially if you're looking to make some certain lifestyle changes around the New Year's, go read that book first before you change anything, because it'll help you teach. Now, newsflash, it doesn't take 21 days to form a new habit. It does not take 21 days to form a new habit. Now, that is something that I think we've heard since elementary school. Most people just have kind of taken as common sense, right? Like, oh, new habit, it only takes 21 days to form a new one, right? The old adage that anyone goes through, especially around New Year's, right? People can just say, oh, if I can just go work out for the first 3 weeks of the year, it'll be a habit. And then typically it leads in disappointment, because after 3 weeks, it's not habitual. It still takes a lot of energy. It still sucks. And people fall off the wagon. They stop going. So where did that come from? And then the study I'm going to highlight actually looks at how long it realistically does take to form new habits, which it's going to be a very nuanced answer, which I appreciate more, because that's what so many answers really should be. But where the 21 days came from, and why I wanted to highlight this story on here, is because we've talked about the game of telephone in the fitness industry a lot, right? How certain studies get misconstrued, and people are making claims that are so far from the actual data in the study that it doesn't even make sense. It's because of this game of telephone, right? The game that we played in elementary school, where everyone lines up, you whisper one, to kid number one, a sentence, and he has to whisper it to the next person, And after it gets whispered 21 times, the end sentence is completely different than the starting sentence. Did y'all play that in elementary school?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, is this me? I didn't know.
I loved it. I used to be so excited. I'm like, oh, I'm going to make this completely different.
I made my family do it over the holidays, and we had 5 people, and it got screwed up. I'm like, how do we screw up a sentence? It was like 5 words, and it got screwed up over 5 people. I'm like, guys, get it together. Come on. So here's what we got. So it all came from and stemmed from a plastic surgeon in the 1950s named Maxwell Maltz. Might be a familiar name. He published the book Psycho-Cybernetics, very popular and also a great read if you're interested. But this is where it kind of stemmed from. Now, this plastic surgeon, Maxwell, he noticed when he would perform an operation, like a nose job per se, that it would take the patient about 21 days to get used to their new face when looking in the mirror. Right? Obviously, if you have facial reconstructive surgery, when you look in the mirror, your body's going to have shock a little bit. You don't recognize that person that you've been looking at your entire life. And after about 21 days, they got a little bit back to normal. They recognized the person in the mirror. He also started to notice this in his own behaviors, where it would take at least 21 days to start forming his own habits. So he published this in that book, Psycho-Cybernetics, still a great read, that was published in 1960. So let's remember, this is 60 years ago. But it blew up, sold over 30 million copies. It was huge. But his original quote, which is not incorrect, he said it takes a minimum of 21 days to form a new habit, a minimum, with no upward end. So he's not claiming it takes 21 days to form a new habit. He just said it takes at least 21 days to form a new habit. And of course, through the game of telephone, it takes a minimum of 21 days turns into it takes 21 days. That's not that large of a bridge to jump, or a gap to jump. And we've seen much bigger gaps jumped in the fitness industry as well. I'm sure we could think of a few off the top of our heads. But the researchers out of the University College of London, this is back in 2010, but they published a paper in the European Journal of Social Psychology where they actually followed 96 people, where they each chose a brand new habit and reported each day on whether or not they did that behavior and how automatic that behavior felt. Because a habit, right, isn't just if you do it, but the effort it essentially takes or the resistance to do that habit, right? Like brushing your teeth. No one really thinks twice except for when you're a kid and your parents had to yell at you, right? Over time, that just becomes a natural habit. You don't really have to, I hope you don't have to think about brushing your teeth. It's just something that gets done. I know you brush your teeth for like 10 minutes a night. What do you brush? You brush your teeth like a madman, don't you?
Oh my gosh. Wait, did I tell you that?
No, I've been watching you. Yes, you told me that. You told me that.
Yeah.
You did something crazy. Like, is it 5 or 10 minutes?
It's like 3 to 4.
Yeah, it's not what you told me. You didn't tell me that. You told me something longer. I wouldn't make that up.
And then I floss. So maybe just like total.
Oh, maybe that was me messing up a game of telephone.
Yeah.
You said 3 to 4. I made it 5 to 10. Slap on my wrist. Anywho, the cool thing about this study is they all chose their own habit to work on, right? Some would be as simple as just drinking a bottle of water with lunch. Others running 15 minutes before dinner, right? So very different habits. And this is going to go into what we kind of hammer home on. But these researchers found that the habits ranged anywhere from taking 18 days, so just under 3 weeks, to 254 days to fully form that automatic function, which I love about this. So technically, they averaged it out and said on average, it takes 66 days to form a new habit. But you can tell from that massive range that it could take a lot longer than you might think. And there's some important takeaways from this research. And I'm pumped that they actually looked at this a little bit more in detail. One, and I think this is the most important note, is researchers found that missing one opportunity to perform that behavior did not materially affect the habit formation process, which I know a lot of people when starting something new, especially when it comes to working out or their new diet, if they're tracking their calories and macros, if they're doing anything, if they miss a day, it's like, what am I doing wrong? I'm a failure. This is not working. Screw it. I'm not even seeing progress. I'll just start again next week or next year, whatever it is, right? When it's like, okay, you can miss once and it did not materially affect the habit formation process at all. So if you miss a day, they still formed it in about the same amount of time if they didn't. It didn't impact the results as long as they kept going. And I think this is not from the research paper, but a cool rule that I like to follow is the never miss twice rule, right? And it's like for the workouts, right? Just make it a rule to not miss 2 days in a row. It's okay to miss one, just never miss 2 days in a row. So that way it's like, okay, crap, I missed today. That's all right. I'm not going to miss tomorrow. If you're trying to work out Monday through Friday, you know, things get in the way. Your kids might have a canceled practice because of a storm. You got to go pick them up. Crap, I missed today. That doesn't mean the week's ruined. That doesn't mean your progress is ruined. It's fine. Just make sure it doesn't happen 2 days in a row. That's a really comforting rule I think a lot of people have, even with myself. Because how easy is it to beat yourself up over missing a new day on your diet or splurging a little bit on dessert or going and missing a word, whatever it is. It's okay to do it once. Just make sure that doesn't become the habit, is to miss your goal. What I liked about this, and this is something we've talked about on this podcast a lot, is usually in like a red flag and like a fitness influencer, I think we talk about this, is those who give like short, sellable, absolute answers versus more nuanced answers. I think this study does a great job, right? When people say, how long does it take to form a habit? People want to hear one simple, short, sweet answer. It takes 21 days. But that's rarely actually the case. It's more nuanced than this. Because think about it, like what different things go into forming a habit, right? One, how big the habit is. If I'm going to try and run 15 minutes before dinner, that takes a lot more effort and resistance than just drinking a glass of water with lunch, right? Or getting some sunlight in the morning. So the actual amount of effort your habit requires is probably going to matter in how long that takes to form, right? Those bigger habits are going to probably take longer to form. Another big one, and you know, we're putting together an outline for goal setting, a whole episode on goal setting, which I'm really excited for, but the strength of your why behind forming it, which translates to one of the best ways I've heard it put. And I don't know where I've heard this first, but it's the difference between just putting effort into forming a habit and enthusiastic effort into forming a habit. And those two things are very different. Putting in just effort, as in going through the task, or enthusiastic effort, showing up and actually wanting to do it. There's a massive difference in the learning curve there if you're actually wanting to show up for it and you're meaning to and you're intentional to. These things all matter. And the most important takeaway from this, I think, is expectations. Because like, how important are expectations in setting a goal, and why do New Year's resolutions fail? because this industry has kind of taught us in fitness that if you're not losing 10 pounds a week or you're not seeing a total body transformation in 30 days, you're a failure. We know that progress takes 10 times longer than that. So I like this study because it's saying, hey, it might not take 21 days. It might take several months for you to form this habit. If you expect that going into it, by 3 months, I want this to be a new habit. That's a lot more likely to happen than just 21 days, where if you get to 21 days and that's your expectation and it's nowhere close to being formed, what are the odds that you're going to keep going and push through? Very little compared to the expectation.
I've always felt like a lot of our behaviors in terms of the why behind why we're doing things is so important. I feel like that can be easily explained using examples from your childhood when you're not consciously thinking about this, but kind of why do we do the things we do? Like an example being if you're younger and your parents tell you to go to bed earlier, you have to go to bed earlier. Do you really want to go to bed earlier? Is that going to make you improve what you're doing before bed and so that you can get to sleep? Probably not. But if you know that you have a test in the morning or the next day, or you know that you have a sports game that you want to be energized to play in. Oh, I want to be alert. I want to be ready to go. I want to be feeling my best, doing my best. I'm going to try and get to bed a little bit earlier. What can I do to achieve that? That's a different example, but that can just easily explain the difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. If you're just getting to the gym because you want to look like this influencer versus I need to go to the gym because I want to be able to play with my children when I get older and have the energy to do so, which one's going to get you to the gym? It goes a long way.
Oh yeah. I think it's a perfect example because the why, and we're going to hammer hard on this, I'm assuming, in the goal setting episode on actually how to follow through, but it's so underestimated the importance of a why and actually figuring, because how many people, I mean, even in just setting a goal, I'm already just going down this rabbit hole of it, which we got to pull back before it just turns into another second episode. But it's like, even when setting a goal, it's like people set such fuzzy goals where they don't really clearly define where they want to go, let alone go layers deep into why they want to get there. Why do you want to look better? Oh, I don't like the way I look. And that's about the extent of why some people want to do it. Not because I feel like shit. I feel like crap and I don't want to be tired at noon. I don't want 3 cups of coffee to push me through the day where I'm exhausted when I get home. I actually want to feel good through the day and be strong enough to where I'm not getting hurt or injured by picking up boxes when I'm packing up the Christmas, whatever it is. There's so many reasons to find whys around you. So the strength of that, the intentions of you showing up, all of those matter so much. So some habits are just going to happen and form quicker than others.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So
I don't know if you've been seeing this, but like on social media, especially now, you'll just see like the 2023 goals and it's just like a list of all these just things that could be so daunting. And it's like a list of drink like 2 gallons of water before noon, or go freaking walk 15,000 steps every single day, or wake up at 5:30 in the morning every single day, or no processed food. And it's all of these huge jumps taken together, and no one really talks about how are you going to get there? What steps are you going to take to get there? It's just people really simplify goal setting.
Yeah, it's what sounds good. It's like they almost want to say, okay, what sounds the best? What's a virtue signal I could put down here?
What can make me look like I'm better than the next person?
Oh, I thought, yeah, kind of like the trend when everyone was showing off their morning routines, where it's like, I wake up at 5 a.m., I take a cold shower in cold brew coffee, then I meditate for 2 hours, and it's like their morning routine's like 8 hours long. It's like, and then I start my first meeting of the day. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, no one's got that much time.
Nothing has made me more productive in my life. And again, I'm my own boss, so I have some more freedom, of course, but then not comparing my routine to someone else's. Like if I get up at 7:30 instead of 5 a.m., that doesn't make me any less productive or successful than the next person. And it's just, you leave so much room for, okay, what can I do within that time period versus, like, I hate myself. I'm not successful. I'm so lazy. Like, I could never be this person. It's just this constant comparison trap.
Isn't that funny though? I was just having that conversation with a client who also owns their own business. And it's like changing your expectations for yourself of like sleeping in. And maybe you're way more productive when you do that and can work. Because I'm actually trying the new year, I'm trying Monday and Tuesday, going as hard as I can taking a half day Wednesday. So like sleeping in, taking the morning off, getting a little work done Wednesday afternoon, then going as hard as I can again Thursday, Friday. And there's a lot of resistance to that because I'm like, if I'm just sleeping in on a Wednesday, I'm going to feel like a lazy loser. But then I'm like, why? Like what? Like why? There's no real reason why that should make you feel different than the other people who are like, oh, you got to wake up at 5 a.m. and do X, Y, Z. So that's actually pretty funny. It's a social contract. All right, let's wrap this one up. So those were our 4 for the first of the new year studies that blew our minds. But to close things out, hopefully this made your Monday suck a little bit less. And as always, thank you so much for leaving a 5-star review. It means a lot. It really does. So thank you so much. It's the easiest way you can show support to this show. You can always catch the research review that we drop weekly every single Friday down in the show notes below. Again, it's just $5 to sign up through the new year. So through January. As we're going through that, you know where to find us. fs.pod on Instagram and TikTok. Fitness Stuff for Normal People on YouTube, where we're trying to get ChatGPT and AI to give us the timestamps. I was talking to ChatGPT for like 4 hours one night trying to figure that out. I'm like, give me timestamps for this video. Anywho, we're improving. We want your guys' feedback, so let us know on Instagram and DMs, anything like that, how we can improve for the new year. But we're glad you're here. Episode 51 in the books. We love you.